This is the news on Tuesday, October the 27th at something like 8 minutes past 1. And the news is, as I interpret it, issues that are going to impact us in October and in the month of November. Well, it's only 15 days to go till the F&L conference, which will be held, in fact, on November 12 and 13, which will be virtual because the planned meeting in Geneva was delayed given the COVID-19 program. However, hopefully it will happen in the first quarter or first tertial period of 2021. The conference, of course, will look at profit, planet and people, very key issues. The changing logistics of 2020, temperature of the industry, well, that'll be a lot of industries to take the temperature of. Digitalized to create value, interesting. But for me, apart from the importance of Europe's trading partners, because we were in a global economy, like it or like it not, to me, this term inclusivity, which is used all the time, is about people. And despite the digital age, we've got to look very much at how the whole economic landscape is impacted by people. Now, let us share screen and talk about the other major event, which will occur in the month of November. And I am going to hopefully play from the start a slide show. So Saudi Arabia, the capital of, Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, will have the G20 Leaders Summit on November 21st and 22nd. It'll be a virtual meeting given the current COVID crisis. And I thought we would start by just giving you an image of Riyadh today, a very dynamic city indeed. Now, the key issues which will be discussed, of course, will be dealt with in a subsequent podcast, if that's what you want to call it. But the G20 focus of the Saudi presidency will look, and I like this, realizing opportunities of the 21st century for all. And I think that's a very important point. Empowering people by creating the conditions in which all people, especially women and youth, can live, work and thrive. And of course, youth unemployment is one of the major problems facing the world today. And that was on the news yesterday, where certain countries in the Mediterranean area where youth unemployment is very high indeed. Safeguarding the planet, very important. We've had news from the moon today through NASA about various evolutions happening there. Safeguarding the planet by fostering collective efforts, protecting our global commons. And I think that, again, is a very important point. And shaping new frontiers by adopting long-term and bold strategies, ladies and gentlemen, to share the benefits of innovation and technological advancement. So all very important indeed. Now, the G20 members, most of you will be aware of them. G20 started, as I'm sure you all know, in 1999 as really a successor to some degree, not a successor, but a developing theme of the G8. And that was, of course, reduced to G7 when Russia engaged in a number of overseas adventures. The European Union is a permanent member. Spain were invited to become a permanent member, but were keen just to be a permanent guest. The suggestion is that Poland would like in their own right to be a member, but they are represented by the EU. And of course, if you look at the economy of the Netherlands, it certainly would qualify to be part of the G20. Now, I thought we'd look at some of the numbers. Now, this is not pure economics in any way. What I've done is take some statistics to give you a flavor of the scale of the economies of the G20 members and the per capita of these countries attending the G20 meeting. Now, I've taken the PPP, which rather than the nominal measure, because that gives account of the relative cost of local services, goods, and local inflation, rather than using international market rates, which are described. More difficult, of course, to give you economic signals through the PPP measure, but this is one where I think it's possibly got better value. China, as you can see, an economy 24.16 trillion international US dollars, with a per capita as decreed by the World Bank before COVID-19 through the World Bank data, showing China with a per capita of 16,784. Now, I use Wikipedia because I know you could use, for example, the World Bank figures, the IMF figures, Investopedia figures. You could use Statistics Times, you could use Trading Economics. So I've only tried to give you a flavor of the scale of these economies. And the IMF figure once COVID was underway for 2020 shows a slightly different per capita. The case of China up at 17,000. Which is quite interesting. Look at the population, 1.439 billion. Now, some people say, well, fine, but you've got to look at the density of the population. Look at that, square kilometers of China, or say 9,596,000 square kilometers of landmass. Very interesting. And look at that, a very similar size in national terms, in area terms to the United States, quite interesting. Now, the population, of course, of the US is only 331 against China's 1.4. So naturally, the numbers are different. Now, Ken Russell, one of our directors, said, Gavin, when you're doing your analysis, just stick in the COVID cases and deaths just to see if there's a relationship between these figures and GDP. Now, I haven't really spent enough time to draw any conclusions from that, but there you are. According to the figures, China has 85,000 cases and only 4,600 deaths. America has 8.9 million cases and 231,000 deaths. India, look at the GDP per capita of India. Now remember, they've got an economy of 8.6 trillion US dollars, very much smaller, as you can see, than China. And a per capita, almost half of China, 7,034 or 6,284 in the 2020 IMF estimates as per Wikipedia. Now look at their population, 1.38 billion, coming up very quickly on China. And you can see that in terms of square kilometers, it's much smaller than China physically, and smaller, of course, than the US. But a different ratio on the COVID, with 7.9 million cases compared to China's 85,800 and 119,000 deaths. Now, some people will question some of these figures. It's not for me to comment on that. I'm purely reporting that I have seen. Quite interesting to look at Japan, 5.2 trillion US dollars, with a GDP per capita, a healthy 43, slightly lower, of course, in 2020 estimates. Look at the population, 126. But Japan has dealt with the population question very effectively because it recognizes very much, although there's a shortage of births to some degree in Japan, there is a recognition, of course, that population growth cannot go on indefinitely at current levels. Today, we're sitting at 7.8 billion people. Japan's got 1,700 deaths with COVID. Look at Germany, 56,000 in terms of GDP per capita, dropping to 53. Population 83 million, quite interesting, with an economy of 4.4. But of course, the debt ratio to the economy in Germany is quite healthy compared to many countries, so they can withstand a lot of uncertainty as a consequence of the COVID problem. Russia has got an economy of about 4 trillion US dollars. Population, interestingly, 146 million. And look at the land area. Of course, it's the biggest country in the world at 17 million square kilometers, and per capita at 29, 27, whichever figure you want to take. And they've got 26,600 COVID deaths. Now, I won't go into any more. I'm just giving you an illustration. Look at Indonesia, look at Brazil. Britain and France, pretty close to each other in many different respects, as you can see. Sometimes Britain slightly ahead of France and vice versa, at 2.97, 2.95 in the size of the economy. And the GDPs are not a million miles apart, although yes, there's a lot of common ground between Britain and France in that sense. Although the number of COVID cases in Britain is serious at 895,000 with 45,000 deaths. Now let's just quickly move on to the next slide, which I won't dwell upon, but I just want to give you an illustration. There's Mexico, 2.42 in terms of size of the economy. It's a big country at 1.9 million square kilometers. Italy, it's been working hard, of course, with the COVID issues. They were the first in Europe to have the major outbreak. They've had 37,500 deaths. But again, you can see the GDP per capita, 4440 area. Turkey, that's another story, very controversial in the current political climate in their discussions with France. But 2.3 is the size of the economy, and their GDP per capita is sitting at 2728. Ironically, it's slightly higher in their case compared to the figures for 2019. Republic of Korea, gosh, they've done awfully well with COVID at 460 deaths and 26,000 cases, but very much on the ball at the beginning. One, of course, of the economies of the world for sure is Canada, with a per capita at 51 and COVID cases 220,000. Saudi Arabia, the host of G20, 1.6 is the size of the economy. Their whole strategy, of course, in Saudi Arabia is Vision 2030, which is to change the focus of the economy towards tourism, transport, and other activities. And they are being largely successful in that move away from a very heavily dependent economy on hydrocarbons. Australia sitting there at 1.3 as a size of economy, with a per capita of 53 down to 50, relatively low cases of COVID deaths. And South Africa sitting in an economy of about 875 billion. Now, these are some of the exciting developments of the G20, of course, are the people they invite. Now, a lot of international organizations are always invited to the G20, the ILO in Geneva, the World Health Organization, and the WTO. Of course, they will be there. And we're waiting anxiously to hear, at least I haven't heard, who the new Secretary General will be. That's going to be very important indeed, especially in the case of Britain, who may well have to have a serious discussion there if they do not conclude an agreement with the European Union. Now, other invited international organizations, OECD Paris, and of course F&L had a very good activity with the International Transport Forum, where we produced a very successful paper on sustainability that we presented at the ITF conference in Leipzig, Germany, some 2 to 3 years ago. Food and Agricultural Organization will be there. They're headquartered in Rome. And if you hadn't seen their building, you've seen it now. And of course, the Banking Stability Fund, terribly important, headquarters in Basel, they will be there too. Also, you've got the World Banking Group from Washington and the IMF, they will be there. And the UN will be there, obviously, with the headquarters in New York. Now, it's quite interesting. Each host of the G20 has the chance to invite their own regional organizations and in many cases their own guests. And in the case of Saudi, they've invited the Arab Monetary Fund. They have their headquarters in Abu Dhabi. The Islamic Development Bank, headquarters in Jeddah, and the Gulf Cooperation Council, very important, of course, for China, who are working very closely with them because energy for China's economy is fundamentally important, and the Gulf Cooperation Council is very representative of all the activities in the Middle East and the Persian Arabian Gulf area. So their headquarters is in Riyadh. Now, it's quite interesting as well. Africa is very important indeed. The African Union, very important body, headquarters Addis Ababa. They will be represented at the meeting by South Africa. NEPAD will be there. Their headquarters are in Midrand in South Africa. New Partnership for Africa's Development. We've got to watch this organization. And of course, ASEAN, that's the new ASEAN headquarters in Jakarta. 10 very exciting countries. I would personally like to see much closer relationship between the EU and ASEAN. And the current presidency of ASEAN is Vietnam, and they will represent ASEAN at the summit. Now, just before I conclude, let me just make a couple of very quick remarks. The Saudi Investment Ministry and the Financial Times have developed a new Financial Times Live and G20 Saudi Secretariat series of discussions. It's called the Global Digit Summit Series. These are taking place on October 21, 22, and later this week, 28, 29 online. We can all access these free online. I've been through 4 or 5 of them already, and I'm very inspired. A very good address by the Saudi investment minister, who himself was the former chief exec of Saudi Aramco. And I'm very impressed by a lady, World Travel and Tourism Council, based in the UK, Gloria Givera Manzo, talking about the importance of tourism and travel. And 1 in 4 jobs, she indicates, are in that area. And it's so important that that area is revitalized post-COVID. Now, these are all the exciting things going on. What I thought we might do in the next discussion is go into some of the specifics that the conference in Riyadh is going to discuss. And we'll conclude with that. And I look forward to seeing you, not just at the F&L meeting, but our next blog, where we can discuss the agenda in detail. Thank you and have a good day.